John Swinney is out on the campaign trail today in Calderbank, North Lanarkshire with Neil Gray. He's very much trying to push the new manifesto pledge that Scotland will have one-stop shops in community pharmacies that will give heart and lung health MOTs to people over 35. Of course, that's the message that he wants to be pushing, but there are lots of other topics in the news today that he was facing questions about from journalists. He was asked about whether Tracy Carruthers of North Lanarkshire Council, who has been a supporter of convicted sex offender Jordan Linden, should be stepping down. And he was also talking about the ongoing situation in Iran and whether that might affect medical supplies moving forward. So a very clear message that the SNP is trying to push today, but there's a lot of other news happening and he's being quite closely scrutinised on these other topics by reporters. You've had a lot of back and forth in the past few days about Scottish Labour and potential deals with reform, grubby backroom deals, I think you said. But polling that was out yesterday showed that actually Reform voters would prefer John Swinney as First Minister than Anna Sarwar as First Minister. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think what is crystal clear is that I will have absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with reform. I am totally and utterly and completely at odds with reform, and I think they're spreading poison in our politics. So that's why I think of reform.
But what do you think about the fact that their voters prefer you to Anna Sarwar?
Well,
why do you think that might be?
I think what it comes down to is the deep. When I've talked about reform voters, I've talked about people being in two categories. I think there are some people who support reform who are racists and who propagate the kind of intolerance that I talk about in reform. And there's another group of people who are angry and frustrated. And I think a lot of that anger and frustration is about the performance of the Labour government, because people feel desperately disappointed that a Labour government was elected on the promise of change in 2024, and they have been, well, I think the most charitable thing you could say is they've been a disappointment. And I think that's what fuels some of the sentiment why people are supporting reform. So I therefore think it's really unlikely that those people would then be likely to prefer the Labour Party if they weren't voting for reform. But so I think that's the best explanation I can give you, Kat, about what I think is fueling that, because I think people are really, really angry.
And there is essentially a sort of no confidence vote today in Tracy Carruthers at North Lanarkshire Council. I'm sure that you have had enough of speaking about this topic at this point, but is it time for her to step back, because this is such a distraction from your campaign? Well,
I've had some material put to me by Conor Gillis at Sky, which I need to go and have a look at. So that's new material to me. So I need to go and have a look at that, and I'll do that, because I think the context in which I was answering the questions I've answered about this already is that I want to make sure and insist that if we have any concerns raised with us, we've got to take them seriously and we've got to investigate them properly and act accordingly. Act accordingly, which means acting fairly. So that's my approach to things. And I've just had stuff put to me, so I'm going to have a look at that.
I mean, unless you can tell me otherwise, as far as I'm aware, the man who covertly recorded a minister and deeply distressed her and two of her staff members is still a member of the SNP, is still campaigning down in Doonfoot, Ayrshire area. Does the party do enough to counter deviance?
Well, what I want to make sure is that wherever we have any complaints, we act accordingly. And we act fairly and properly and fully, and we take necessary action. And that's my style of operation. That's what and I'm confident that's what we'll do.
And can I just be very controversial and ask about the actual job in hand today? I'm really interested in the fact that you're copying a Japanese model, and I wonder where that that came from?
Well, I think,
and are you looking more broadly overseas for ideas for the
well,
NHS?
I think we've got to be, well, what lies at the heart of it is that I am determined to improve the National Health Service so it meets the needs of the public in Scotland. We're delivering significantly on that by the reduction in long waits, which I promised would be the case, down 9 months in a row, a rising number of GPs, expansion of GP walk-in clinics, which I think will improve access, overcome the ATM rush challenges and all the difficulties that gives rise to. The concept that I'm advancing today is consistent with the details of our population health framework, which is all about early intervention. So this is about locating health checks in accessible locations, in local community organisations, in high streets, in different settings, where we can make sure people can get access to testing arrangements which will highlight their risk to heart and lung disease. Because the earlier we can identify that exposure to risk and intervene, the better the outcomes for individuals, but also the better the sustainability for the National Health Service. So I'm open to where we can find new ways of working that will improve the opportunities and the circumstances and the outcomes for people in the National Health Service.